Hey guys, it's Nathan from History Bomb, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the world's first combat helmet, otherwise known as the Adrian helmet. Now, what makes this the first combat helmet is, it is a metal helmet. So maybe we shouldn't call it the first combat helmet, just the first modern combat helmet. So there was obviously metal helmets thousands of years ago. The Greeks and the Romans had them, but they were fighting with swords and knives and axes. When mankind kind of shifted towards guns and artillery, those metal helmets didn't really do much good. So they kind of became more decorative than anything. And I have a good example of that here. This is a World War I pickelhaube. Now, World War I was where we also got the Adrian helmet. It was a war of a lot of modernization, where a lot of people say it was like a medieval war combined with a modern war, because they were fighting with guns but also with clubs and knives. So they had helmets like this, which were obviously a lot more decorative. Now this one, even though it comes from about the same time period as the Adrian, it's leather, and leather obviously doesn't do much good at protecting your head. There also wasn't much of a liner inside. It was kind of just this helmet against your head, and you can see it's obviously, like I said, it's a very decorative thing. There's this little leather visor on there. This big, obviously the most notable thing about a pickelhaube is that big spike up top, and also this plate, which I'll actually pull off of there, and then the Imperial Eagle plate. And all of this, although it looks nice, in this helmet there's actually helmets that are the same kind of helmet that are a lot more decorated with plumes and feathers and colors. Even though all this looks nice, it proved to not be very efficient. Now, in Napoleonic Wars, where they were standing in big lines and firing all at once at each other, this worked fine. They didn't need a lot of helmet protection because they weren't running and fighting and ducking down. They were just standing out in the open. But when World War I started, they noticed, the Germans as well as other countries, they noticed, hey, these cloth caps and these real decorative looking helmets, they're not doing much. People are getting hurt, because they're not standing out in the open anymore. They're in trenches. There's artillery and there's rocks and debris falling down on them. So the French were the first to come up with something different, which is the Adrian helmet. Now, it kind of looks, to me at least, and you might agree, it kind of looks like a firefighter's helmet. That's because the first Adrian helmets were directly inspired by French firefighting helmets. Now, in a lot of ways, the French had a very bad reputation in World War I for kind of using poor or outdated equipment. But like I said, they were the first to think of the idea of a modern steel helmet. Now, of course, this is pretty thin. It's not going to stop a bullet, but it would protect from falling debris and rubble, and also from shock waves. There's actually a recent study from Duke University where they tested a whole bunch of different helmets about defense from a shockwave from above. The Adrian helmet, like this, actually outperformed modern combat helmets. Obviously not for stopping debris, but as far as stopping shock waves. And a lot of that's due to that nice crest on top that kind of breaks up the airflow. Now, the French, like I said, figured this out first, that they should try metal helmets. The British and the Americans quickly followed, and the Germans, by 1916, had gotten rid of the pickelhaube and switched to a steel helmet that looked a lot more like what you saw in World War II. This particular Adrian, it is actually not French, and it's not from World War I. It's a little bit later. From my research and from help from people online, I believe it is probably a Polish helmet, probably from about the 1930s. And which also goes to show the Adrian helmet was a pretty popular helmet choice for several decades and throughout several nations. In World War I, obviously the French wore it. Some Americans actually wore it too, especially black troops. The pretty famous Harlem Hellfighters wore French Adrian style helmets. But the Adrian helmet still was popular in France. They still wore it in World War II, but many other countries wore it. They were worn in the Spanish Civil War. They were worn in Italy, in Greece, I believe, and like I said, this particular one here is Polish, as far as I can tell. Now, like I said, these wouldn't have done much to stop bullets, but for decades, they were considered highly advanced, reliable pieces of equipment. In fact, helmets that could reliably stop bullets, they didn't come around until just a few decades ago. So for several decades, this helmet, which started off as just a simple firefighter's helmet, became one of the most iconic, and is still one of the most iconic helmets on Earth. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave comments down below, and hopefully I'll be doing another video for you real soon.